Graham, you didn't chair the meeting at Menangle on Saturday night, but we'll get you to run through the Stewards Report for us anyway. We start with race 1, I've Got a Life.
Yeah, not a lot to report here, Greg. Basically, I've Got a Life was well driven by Darren Hancock and probably had one crack at them and got over the top of them. Bundaburra, the country horse, ran home late. Maybe a horse to follow if it stays in town.
Okay, that's race number 1. Race number 2, this was taken out by Beats, and gee, he looked well placed after racing Free For All Company the week before.
Absolutely, been in good form, driven positively from the draw, was inclined to over-race perhaps at various stages of the race, but asserted himself in the end. We did have a change of tactics in that race for Seven's Hope, which was driven forward with cover, but look, all honours with the winner.
Race number 3. Now, this was taken out by Lose Lad. Somewhat of an upset. Mac Beauty, the short price favourite in the race, just getting run over at the finish.
Well, with respect to the form students, if you look at past performances, perhaps it was an upset. If you look at the recent performances of Lose Lad, I think the horse has been quite consistent. Was well driven by Gavin Fitzpatrick, 3 pegs, had last crack at Mac Beauty. Arguably, you'd expect Mac Beauty to continue to be improved with further racing. He might have had his birthday, but I think he was entitled to the victory.
All right, what about...
the other horse there that was, I think, very good was the visitor Devendra, and if it stays in New South Wales, it'll more than pay its way.
Okay, so Devendra out of that one. What about race number 4? This was taken out by Kerry Ann Turner and Cameron Jones with Bonus Spin.
Yeah, look, a very competitive race. There were probably a couple of hard luck stories, but in all, it was good to see Cameron win for the Informed stable.
All right, race number 5. This was another Kerry Ann Turner winner. Of course, Kerry Ann's not far away from giving birth to her first child. Robbie Morris, her partner, he drove Ideal Legacy to victory in race number 5. Yeah,
again, well driven, and the 3 Informed horses basically asserted themselves in Ideal Legacy, Global View, and My Guy Mac. There was a very cheap sectional in the first quarter, was 31.9, just slipped under the time standard, and that probably told the story of the race.
Okay, what about the next race? Now, this was one of the feature, the Rangi Bill, taken out by Perfezione for David Hewitt.
Well, very competitive, Greg, and I think it brought together a number of improving and progressive mares who's in my time in New South Wales have continued to progress. They might have been down to CO and so forth when I came here, and then now they're in Group 3 company. So they're probably all stepping up, but I'd say the first 7 have all raced very, very well, and probably luck at a vital stage have caused some people to have a hard luck story. Snowcane come from the tail of the field, had to negotiate traffic in the straight to run a gallant second, but you can't knock the winner, Perfezione. It's run true to its previous start.
Okay, so a couple of hard luck stories in that one. Now, race number 7, we're seeing more of these races in New South Wales, the Claimers, and this was taken out by one of the top price claimers in the race, Sterling William.
Well, I guess, he was the class horse in the race compared to what he's done outside claiming company, and the results show that he was superior on the night.
And the final event, the Trotters, this was a really good race. We had Flying Eyes of the reigning New South Wales Trotter of the Year taking on Thunder Road. Darren Hancock was just asking a few questions of the fitness of Flying Eyes throughout.
Well driven, and I think you've summed that up, that the top 3 horses are obviously got great ability, and Flying Eyes are returning from a spell has opened to further improvement, I'd suggest.
All right. Now, I just want to pose a question. We didn't have a Stewards Report going back a couple of weeks ago. There was a protest involving I'm Mr. Brightside. It was second against first. The protest was dismissed, but Robbie Morris got 10-day suspension out of it. What was the reasoning in the stewards dismissing the protest?
Right. Well, there are 2 separate aspects to the race, but if you look at the grounds for objection, the grounds were that Devil Dodger received interference approaching the finish. The stewards had the view that it was probably some 40 to 45 metres from the finish, and at about that point there was interference to Devil Dodger. We felt that having regard to where the interference occurred, having regard to the way that the horses were finishing the race off, having regard to the beaten margin of a half neck, the stewards couldn't be satisfied to the necessary degree. that but for the impediment that Devil Dodger was going to finish in front of I'm Mr. Brightside. So that's the reason for the protest. And as I often say to you, Greg, if you tweak the variances in a protest differently, if the margin had been less, if it had happened perhaps further from the line or closer to the line, there may well have been a different decision. But that was the considered opinion of the 4 stewards present. All
right. Now the suspension didn't in fact come from that incident. Is that what you're saying? It was from what happened down the whole straight?
No, the stewards, the suspension did come from the interference, and it was the stewards' view that Robert Morris, as Mount I'm Mr. Brightside, had restricted to an extent the running of Devil Dodger, and at that stage of the race, in trying to correct his drive to shift up the track, he'd actually briefly locked wheels with Devil Dodger. So we felt that the interference rested solely at the feet of Robert Morris, and whilst he may have made some attempt to extricate himself from that position, we felt that action was too late. That matter is now subject to an appeal, which Robert is entitled to do, and we'll argue that in another forum.
So was it a tough decision for the stewards in the room on the night?
I don't think either was particularly tough, Greg, to be honest. I can tell you it wasn't unanimous, but it wasn't. The debate was robust, as it often is, but it certainly wasn't subject to a casting vote without going into details.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time again this week. We'll speak with you next week.
Pleasure again, Greg.